Republican side. We have one. Freedom Caucus member Chip Roy, Republican from Texas. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for taking the opportunity.
Good evening, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
So what's your counsel to the president?
Well, look, I think the president needs to stick with the plan that the American people want, which is a secure border. As you know, I was down in the Rio Grande Valley last week.
Yes, sir.
And I wish that all the American people could see what I saw, which was almost 150 to 200 people personally coming across the border, talking to the Border Patrol about the 400,000 people that will come to the Rio Grande Valley this year alone, of whom 200,000 won't even be apprehended. And of the ones who will be, 90% will be caught and released because we have judicially created mandatory catch and release. We found 54 people in a stash house in Houston, Texas, who are being held ransom by the cartels that have operational control of our border and that are dictating to the United States the terms of what our security at our border looks like. Tamaulipas, the state right across the river, is a level 4 state by the State Department, which means it's a no travel zone.
Right.
It's more dangerous than Honduras, than Guatemala, and than many of the countries from which these people are coming. We need to secure the border, and the president ought to stick to that.
The question has always been priority. You know, a number of the things that you just mentioned, and Congressman, I quibble with none of them. I've done the reporting. I've been all along the border. I've got great sourcing in DHS and CBP.
Right.
They need physical barriers. But there is only one person who says it is the top priority, and that's the President of the United States. Many of those things you're talking about don't deal with physical barriers. They deal with rules, flow, understandings in the home countries, and interdiction efforts. And all of those should be funded, and the requirements are great. This president says it's all about the wall. That's where the trouble is.
Well, what the president offered, if you remember, was 234 miles of fencing, $600 million of humanitarian relief, 75 judges, 50,000 beds. And oh, by the way, Democrats now, for some reason, they want to make an argument that we don't need beds, when the beds are the very issue that we need to deal with the asylum crisis and the Flores decision, which is the judges that have put on our backs a judicially created mandatory
We'll have a
release,
Democrat
which
come
is
on
causing
about
the problem.
that, but you know, just I'll let the Democrat make his own case. But
sure,
little apples and oranges. How many beds should ICE have to do their enforcement versus how many beds should DHS, CBP have to accommodate people who come over as families?
Well,
they're going to parse
that,
but I get the issue.
And as you know, we need beds both for interior enforcement, for ICE, we need beds at the border. And if we do that, we can actually help the very migrants who seek to come here rather than the girls getting sold into the sex trafficking trade and they're being leveraged by the cartels, which, as you know, it's a very dangerous environment.
Right, it's just the wall won't stop that. See, here's my question for you,
Well, I disagree with that. I do.
Well, let's talk about that quickly, and then we'll go into what the alternative is.
Okay.
How does a wall stop trafficking when, first of all, the main part of our problem with trafficking is American kids being trafficked around this country, and there's no similar sense of urgency from this president or any of you about dealing with that. I spent months on a documentary for HLN documenting it. It's a real problem. You guys don't talk about it. But the trafficking that comes across the border, it's not about not having a fence. It's about a system. It's about poverty. It's about criminality and the need for partnerships and interdiction. You're not a wall away from fixing it.
Well, Chris, look, I actually very much appreciate you spotlighting that issue. It's very important. And look, I take a little issue with that. When I was in the Attorney General's office with Ken Paxton, we created a human trafficking division to focus on this very problem. And you're right. Internally, it's a problem with American citizen kids.
Huge.
But it's a problem for the children that are the 10-year-old and 11-year-old girl that I talked to at the Rio Grande who were walking from Honduras without their parents. And you and I both know that a third of those girls are mistreated on the journey.
Terrible.
Now, to your point about fencing, if you look at the Rio Grande Valley sector alone, on the eastern section by the Gulf of Mexico, you've got about 35 miles of fencing and significant infrastructure. On the western side, by McAllen, you've got very little infrastructure. 94% of the traffic comes up the western side.
They say they need more. The 55 miles they're asking for in this deal is a minimum, but CBP was asking for something like that before this. I have never argued that physical barriers are immoral or unnecessary.
And I appreciate that.
My reporting dictates otherwise. I'm just saying, as a matter of priority, the rules of flow are killing the men, not literally. What's choking the system are the rules of flow. God forbid that we lose any of our men or women protecting the border. I would never want to see that. Nobody should. But the rules are choking them. You got to work on the rules. It's not about a wall.
The priority for me would be to make sure that we've got physical infrastructure for our Border Patrol, but also the cameras and technology they need. But here's the important part. Fix the Flores and asylum decisions that are the magnets causing them to come here and undermine the cartel.
Get after it. Argue about the rules, but none of this is about the wall. See, the president has hyper-focused you guys on physical barriers, and I know you wouldn't have done that. I know no savvy politician would have started with, I'm all in on a wall, or forget it, I won't negotiate. That's his politics. So
Well,
now
keep
you're
in
left
mind-
with, I don't know how you get a better deal. Would you really rather have him call a national emergency? Would you rather have him go executive action and then have to pick from this list of priorities? I'll put it up for the audience. You already know them, Congressman. But if he does executive action or a national emergency, you're going to have to pick winners and losers. Do you take money from counter narcotics? Do you take it from military construction? Do you take it from national disaster repair? Do you really want to pick losers for a physical barrier that isn't the main priority?
Well, this is not about picking winners or losers. It's about doing our basic job. We have the resources we need to be able to secure the border if we'll focus them in the right direction. We know that fences work. You've acknowledged it and I've acknowledged it. We know that physical barriers will help the Border Patrol. It ought to be one piece of the entire solution. And here's the reason the American people want a physical barrier. It's evidence that there's something happening at the border rather than more talk. We've had talk for 15 years, and now people are dying. American citizens like Jared Vargas in San Antonio, who was murdered last year by an illegal immigrant, and the illegal immigrants in the stash house I described, and the people that are being abused on the journey. We can stop this. We're the most powerful nation on earth.
The wall
And the
will
idea
not
that
stop those things. There's a
It
lot
will
of things
help.
you need to do.
It will help
would help
immensely.
But
It
you're
will
going to have
help
to make a
immensely.
decision whether or not to vote on this deal. It's not going to give you everything. It's going to give you something. And if you don't vote it, I just don't see a better alternative. What's the chance that you come to a place where you can be comfortable saying yes?
I need to see significant resources for both the physical assets that are needed that the Border Patrol have asked for, and I need it to be well above the baseline, which is currently this deal. It's not enough. It's not what we need, and I want to see actual action. I think what we ought to do is do a 2-week clean CR, and we ought to force these people back into the room to do their job.
But that's
they
what
can
we
do
did
it,
the
and
last
common
time.
sense dictates
After a
it.
shutdown that just was so bad for people, I just feel like
That's why a 2-week clean CR would get us another 2 weeks. We'd fund everything we need to fund. Nobody's going to have any issues. Let's force everybody back into a room, and let's go find the resources we need to do our job. By the way, let's fix Flores. Let's fix and let's have
you're
the
not going
beds
to do that
we
in
need.
2 weeks. Why don't you do something? Put this behind you. Get the government open, and then keep it going. You don't need this kind of existential leverage to get something. These problems are real. As soon as you get the president and this hyper-focus on the wall out of the mix, you'll find all kinds of partners looking to deal with these things.
It's never been just the fence or the wall. It's
has
also
for
been about the
him,
50.
Congressman.
Well, no, it's been the 50,000 beds that have been rejected by
He's never
Democrats.
mentioned it the way he does the wall. We had to pull it out of him. You know, we had to force the White House to start talking about the other priorities because they're so higher on the list for
But I
everyone
can tell you-
involved with keeping us safe.
But I can tell you that we in Congress are talking about it, and I know that the president and his team have sent that up in their proposals, that we have 50,000 beds, that we not reduce the ICE beds, that we have 75 judges, humanitarian relief, Border Patrol gets the resources they need, and we have a fence that the American people can see, and fences work, and they stop the cartels from getting action across the river.
Look, we
and
both
keeping the
know-
flow across.
We both know there are tons of fences down there. They need more. I understand that. It's a
Yeah.
question of priorities and timing. Congressman, let's do this. You got an open avenue to me on this. You let me know where your head is on the plan, how it's working. I'd love
Yep.
to be able to report it to the audience, and you're welcome back anytime to discuss it. Disagreement with decency is the only way forward.
I agree with you, Chris. Thank you, and thank you for focusing on the humanitarian crisis and the sex trafficking. It's so important, and thank you for having me on.
100%. Be well. Good luck doing your job.
Thank you.
All right. I want to bring in a